This was a book on boundaries, and it was by far the best book on parenting that I've ever read in my entire life. And it wasn't even about parenting. Hey there, welcome back. I read 4 books this month, and I am going to be giving you my thoughts, opinions, and feelings on all of them. I'm holding up one book because I read the other books digitally using my phone or my iPad. So that's why I'm only holding up one book, but I did read 4. So without further ado, the first book that I read this month was called The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer. I read this book because I started reading Proverbs in the Bible, and in verse 7, I believe, it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." And I was like, okay, that's the beginning. So I went on a whole deep dive, and I was like, I do know that the word fear there doesn't necessarily mean like fear, like being afraid, although that makes sense when you're thinking about God who created everything. It means like reverence. And I remembered reading the book, The Knowledge of the Holy, before and just feeling like literally so in awe. And so I read The Knowledge of the Holy again. It was amazing. Basically, it's just talking about the different attributes of God. And it's really interesting and really well-rounded. And it really just elevates the view in your mind, in your heart of God. It, to me, is a great book if you're trying to facilitate that fear of the Lord. Like, who is he? Who does he say he is? What are the different characteristics and attributes? Even though I don't think that that is the most accurate way to describe it, it talks about the nuance and how all of God's attributes exist simultaneously and exist cohesively. They're not like separate things. Like God's love works perfectly with his righteousness and his justice and his mercy. It all blends together. They're all different facets of the same diamond, if you will. And I think that that is a really interesting thing. It's like people will say, well, if God is love, how can? And it's like, God is love, but he is not just love. And so the book was really beautiful in that literally starting on page 1 of this book, I had to pause and just like take a second. It says that a person will never rise above its view or opinion of God. And I thought that that was like really interesting and impactful. If you have a low view of God, then like that's as high as you can go. It also talked a lot about idols, which I think is really interesting because a lot of times people have idols and they call them God and even think that it's God. But if it's not who God calls himself, then you just made an idol in your mind and you're worshiping that because you can't be worshiping who he doesn't say that he is. So incredible book. I had a fantastic time reading it. I'm just looking. I actually made like a reference library. So The Knowledge of the Holy, I rated 4.7 stars. I said, read this if you want to transform your decision making, deepen your discernment, and experience a profound connection with the loving God that will enrich every aspect of your life. So that was The Knowledge of the Holy, and that was the first book that I read in August. The next book that I read in August was Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And this book was great. It talked a lot about emotions and how Christian people can often downplay the importance or say that emotions aren't important at all. And it kind of talks about the importance of putting emotions in their place. I have a short video on like feelings and, you know, feeling bad is good. The thing about feelings is you want to keep them in their proper place. This book talked a lot about that in the beginning. But the end of the book was where it became really impactful for me. It talked about something called a daily office, which is basically just like setting up and taking time to be with God and having a system like prayers and checking back in throughout the day. So for instance, I wake up in the morning, I pray, I read my Bible, and then I have something, maybe I set an alarm in my phone so that later in the day, maybe it's 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, I check in again. Maybe again in the evening, I check in again. And it's just being really intentional about being aware of God's presence in your life and making him a part of your daily life, which really just comes down to awareness, but this gives structure to the idea of awareness. And so that was impactful. The most impactful thing that this book talked about was a Sabbath. If you're someone who works a lot and is always working, and especially if you're an entrepreneur and you work from home, then you it's easy to not turn it off. And so this book talked about turning it off and the impact of that, and it's talked about how like even God rested on the seventh day, so like everything will be fine if you take a day off. And I thought that was really impactful. So that's something that, you know, we're starting to implement in the House of Transformation, and we're really going to be intentional about taking off from sundown on Saturday to sundown on Sunday. And what does that look like? So for me, it's going to start, and we tried this past weekend and it didn't go perfectly, but it went. But it starts with getting the house ready, because if I'm not supposed to be like working and cleaning and doing all this stuff that I usually like, you know, reserve for the weekends, then I need to have everything in order by like Saturday afternoon. So starting that cleanup process, laundry process on Friday, things like that. And then opening the Sabbath with gratitude and ending it with intentions for the week. But yeah, just a Sabbath, just a break, to be grateful for all that God has done, to remember all that God's done, to take in the life that I have, and not just be going all the time. Like if I don't go, the whole train will stop, because that's not the case. And so just a Sabbath to do things that I want to do things that I've been putting off because I don't have time, and to just like be and do things that I want, and do things that my daughter wants to do with me, or to do things as a family with my husband and my daughter, or just do something with my husband. A Sabbath is just like, I'm taking a break. So as an entrepreneur, that was really impactful to think about. And especially like it does make me feel a little silly to think that like, if I stop doing this, like everything's going to fall apart. It's like, no, God took a break. You can take a break, chill out. So that was Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. It talked about a lot of things. It was really good. That book I rated 4.45 stars. And I said, read this if you're seeking a deeper, more authentic spiritual life by breaking down emotional barriers, understanding your family's impact on your faith, and learning how to keep God at the center of your daily actions and relationships. That book was, again, 4.45 stars. So really good book. Again, super strong start. Everything is almost above 4.5 stars. The next book, and that book I actually read because Dr. Darius Daniels, who's a pastor, posted a video talking about the 5 books that impacted his life the most. And he is a person who has impacted my life, like top 3 people. And so I definitely wanted to look into it. It was an excellent recommendation. The next book that I read is actually the physical book that I have here. It is called Reversing Hermon, and it is about Enoch, the Watchers, and the Forgotten Mission of Jesus Christ by Dr. Michael S. Heiser. I read this because I was interested in it, and what can I say? Well, I'll start with what I wrote. I said, read this book if you want to play a game of telephone with ancient text and watch the author's arguments get lost in translation. So, I did not start with his like most well-known book, which is actually The Unseen Realm, which I will probably read at some point. I just needed a break. His argument style I didn't enjoy. So he's putting forth a lot of ideas about the Book of Enoch, or First Enoch, and its impact on the New Testament primarily. I didn't think the argument was strong. Okay, so I think we should stick to the facts. And the facts are, in the New Testament, there are 2 verses that reference the Book of Enoch, which does show that the writers had some knowledge of the Book of Enoch. I do not think that it means that the whole book is super important and valid. I think that it more lends itself to mean that those references are valid and important. I also saw recently some guy on TikTok who like is calling everything demonic, like it's demonic, it's demonic, it's demonic. And I think that that might just be like a clicks and views thing, which I get and respect, do your thing. I'm not the kind of person who can just say things for views. Like I actually have to believe it, because then I was like, well, how? And he's like, oh, that's something I'll have to go look into. So it's like, and he's very smart. So I'm sure that it is just for the views. Side note, I posted a video that said, or a short, and it said that you can't talk about race without talking about racism because racism came first. It's true. It is factually true. I think between like the 1400s and the 1800s, this whole concept of race was constructed. That is a fact. But people were commenting, and it clearly was like something that like people had an allergic reaction to, which wasn't my intention. My intention wasn't even, anyway, I digress. But I posted that really believing it. But like the Book of Enoch, if it was demonic, it wouldn't be quoted, God's word, with human writers. It wouldn't be quoted in the Bible. So that's my thoughts on the Book of Enoch. But I feel like he tries to stretch the impact and goes on a lot of tangents and a lot of theories and a lot of ideas. And I get it. Like, it's interesting. But the way that he like downplays people who disagree, and then will say like, a lot of people think that, but this is wrong, as we already established. And I'm like, we haven't established anything. It's like, don't tell me we established it. I'm still waiting for it to be established. Well, as we've already established, this was very impactful to the New Testament authors. And I'm just like, I don't think that 2 verses is really impactful. I think it's 2 verses, So, the Book of Hermon. I rated that book 2 stars. Reading enjoyability, I gave it 1 point because I was struggling to finish that book just because the arguments weren't strong. And I felt like I was listening to someone make a bad argument and act like it was really good and powerful and strong. So that was Reversing Hermon. That was the worst book I read in August. So the final book that I read was Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. This was another recommendation by Dr. Darius Daniels in that video. And I don't know if it came at the perfect time. I think it did. But it was just so good. It talks about how a lot of times, a lot of the struggles that we have in our lives are due to the lack of boundaries. We say yes to things that we want to say no to because we think it's the right thing to do. We think we're being Christ-like. We think we're being nice. We think we're being kind. But if our heart is saying no, and our mouth is saying yes, like God looks on the heart. So it's not like you're actually doing a good thing, even if they might perceive it as that. So this book was just excellent on setting boundaries, talking about where I stop and where the other person begins. What's my responsibility? What's not my responsibility? A lot of times Christians, like, it's easy for us to muddle it and think we're being Christ-like. And it talks about how we're responsible to other people, but we're not responsible for other people. We need to take care of ourselves before we have any way to actually take care of other people. And so it was really interesting that way. And also, like, this was a book on boundaries, and it was by far the best book on parenting that I've ever read in my entire life. And it wasn't even about parenting. So that's the crazy thing. I think that I might have highlighted the entire book, like every single page. I was like, ooh, that's good. Ooh, that's for me. Boundaries are so important, whether it's like you need to set boundaries with your family, like the family you grew up with, whether you need to set boundaries with your spouse, whether you need to set boundaries with your kids, your friends, people at work. Like, it covers all of it in very practical ways. Whether you're a Christian or not, this book is impactful. And yeah, just literally 5 stars. My dad used to say, and he quotes in the book, poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. And so that is the idea of letting people experience the consequences of their choices, which isn't to say that you never do a nice thing for somebody. But if somebody's always asking you to do the nice thing for them because they're planning poorly, that's not your responsibility. And so this book was just really impactful, really helpful in like clarifying boundaries, and I can't wait to like review my notes on it and really dive in. I know it's gonna take probably like 6 hours just because I took I literally highlighted everything, you guys. So yeah, that is that. Also, I have a little something that I want to show you guys. Welcome into the House of Transformation Reference Library. This is what I wanted to show you. I've been working on it since last month, just getting everything in order. Either by the time this video goes up, the waitlist will be ready, or it will be ready. Whichever one it is, it's a surprise to you just as much as it is to me, but you can find the link in the description of the video, either for the waitlist or to get access to the actual reference library. What You Can Expect to Find Inside is the title, the author, the genre, the status. All of these books that are on here I've actually finished. It says the month that I finished reading it, my personal rating, and read this if. For some of them, it might not have my notes in it. This book doesn't have my notes in it. It just has my rating. Now, I said that this was a 5-star read, but after I went through my custom rating system, if you guys are interested in that, I have a video coming up soon, but it's actually 4.8 stars. For the books where I actually do have notes, what you can expect to find is my rating, why I rated it, what I rated it, a table of contents, basically on what you can expect to find inside, and then my notes on quotes. So this is just like an intro into why I read the book. It has the video, it has some of my notes. These little arrows will drop down notes, things that I have to say about the experience. So yes, this is the reference library. But those are the 4 books that I read in August. They were great. If you guys read any of them or have already read any of them, let me know. So yeah, overall, great reading month. I will be giving Dr. Michael S. Heiser another try with Unseen Realm, because I think that that one is probably his better work, or that's what I read in the reviews anyway. So I'm really interested and excited to read that. And yeah, I don't really have a lot of reading lined up. I'm more in like implementation phase of my reading. Anyways, that is it for today's video. If you like the video, give it a like. If you like the vibes, you can subscribe. That's all I've got for today. Bye guys.